Welcome back. I'm your host, Eddie Muller, taking a break from my roost at Bar 355 in Oakland. This July, I've got some stellar films for you on Noir Alley. Tonight's offering is not one of them. That said, there is plenty of fun to be had with This Side of the Law, a nearly forgotten 1950 film from the B Unit at Warner Brothers. Look at this. This film was so cheaply made they couldn't even afford a full-color poster. I'm joking, but only slightly. This Side of the Law was made in 1948 under the title Deadlock, but for some reason it wasn't released until 1950. I'm not entirely sure why, but it could be because the film bears more than a passing resemblance to another film released by Warner's in 1947, The Unsuspected, a top-shelf Michael Curtiz production made in partnership with the studio. Both films are set largely in shadowy mansions with plots involving the sudden reappearance of characters long missing. In this one, we know right away it's a ruse, and that our hero, played by Kent Smith, is a drifter hired to impersonate a missing millionaire. Not an uncommon plot in film noir, where lots of beleaguered men and women left destitute by the Depression or adrift in the war's aftermath get tangled up in nefarious plots just to earn some dough. Typically, the poor saps are used as pawns by affluent schemers angling to make themselves even richer. These tales tend to start with a, "How did I get myself into this scene?" And this movie has a great one, before they flash back to explain the protagonist's predicament. 9 times out of 10, the answer is, I needed the money. I mean, this is noir, after all. Why take a salaried job when you can get entangled in a complex, dangerous, and illegal scheme involving false identities and mix it up with a bunch of treacherous miscreants, any one of which is capable of murder? You'd have to be stupid, right? Well, the chump who's that stupid in today's film is played by Kent Smith. When this was shot in the fall of 1948, Smith was coming off his biggest success as the male lead in the 1947 hit Noir Apprentice, another noir that turns on mistaken identity. Although he was the central character in that film, Smith was overshadowed by his co-star, Ann Sheridan. This was something of a pattern for the actor. Whenever he got more than a supporting role, Smith's average Joe persona barely registered opposite glam co-stars like Simone Simon in Cat People, Ann Sheridan in Noir Apprentice, and Joan Crawford in The Damned Don't Cry. Here, Smith gets one of his biggest roles ever. He's in virtually every scene, and he's asked to hold his own opposite a couple of relative newcomers, Swedish import Vivica Lindfors and the versatile Janice Page. B-budget mysteries typically pack a lot of plot twists into a story confined to a few sets. That's the challenge neophyte screenwriter Russell Hughes faced in adapting The Doctor Deals in Death, a story by veteran pulp writer Richard Sale. Well, Hughes must have made some drastic changes, because there's no doctor in the final draft. Richard Sale began writing B-pictures in the early 40s after spending the prior decade as a highly paid, relatively speaking, writer of pulp fiction. In Hollywood, he wasn't particularly ambitious or inventive, but he was prolific, turning out a steady stream of fodder for the bottom halves of double bills. His work got a big boost when he married writer Mary Luce, niece of the legendary Anita Luce, Hollywood's first female screenwriter. Mr. and Mrs. Sale co-wrote many of the films that he directed in the 1950s. Now, this was only the second feature directed by Richard L. Baer, although he'd made another 3 by the time this one was finally released. He was already well known at Warner's as the writer, producer, and director of the long-running Joe McDoakes series of comedy shorts. This assignment was a definite change of pace. Made in 1948, but not released until July 6th, 1950, 75 years ago today, here is This Side of the Law. I don't know about you, but when plots get this outlandish, I stop taking any of it seriously, which doesn't mean you can't still enjoy it. But let's just admit that much of the pleasure in film noir comes from watching people do incredibly stupid things. In noir, agreeing to a money-making scheme is like entering an abandoned house in a horror movie. Nothing good can possibly come of it, but you still want them to go in. Frankly, I stopped following this plot as soon as Robert Douglas showed up at the beginning. I mean, who in their right mind would accept a deal from a lawyer with a mustache like that? That stash is 1940s cinematic shorthand for "I am the villain." But who knows? There could be people in this world who can't recognize a villain when he's staring them right in the face. In fact, villainous roles would become something of a staple for actor Robert Douglas, who had only just arrived in Hollywood from his native England, where in addition to being accomplished on the stage and screen, he'd served as a pilot in the Royal Navy. His debut at Warner's came in 1948 with The Decision of Christopher Blake, quickly followed by The Adventures of Don Juan opposite Errol Flynn. Swashbuckling bad guys would be his bread and butter for the next 10 years in pictures like Ivanhoe and The Prisoner of Zenda. He'd eventually shift from acting to directing, mostly television, including several episodes of the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. Vivica Lindfors was also a European import, a stage and screen star in her native Sweden who'd signed a contract with Warner's in 1946. She first appeared on U.S. movie screens in 1948, with headlining roles in To the Victor and opposite Robert Douglas in the previously mentioned Adventures of Don Juan. Her next picture would be Night Unto Night, directed by Don Siegel, who'd become the third of Lindfors' four husbands. Janice Page had mostly appeared in lightweight musicals, including Romance on the High Seas, a Michael Curtiz production released in 1948. That's the picture that introduced Doris Day to moviegoers, and it wouldn't be the last time Page and Day's careers intersected. On Broadway, Page would originate the role of Babe Williams in The Pajama Game, although Doris would play the part in the 1957 movie version. Here, Page got to show a different facet of her persona, shelving the singing and dancing for a turn as a nasty noir dame. Now, director Richard L. Baer may not be a well-known name, but he literally wrote the book on film directing, specifically The Film Director, a practical guide to motion picture and television techniques, which for many years was the textbook for aspiring filmmakers, the way Sid Field's screenplay has long been the Bible for aspiring screenwriters. Baer was one of the first Hollywood directors to emerge from film school, specifically USC's School of Cinematic Arts, founded in 1929. Baer made his first film, West of the Rio Grande, as a 16-year-old high school student in Modesto, California, working with his pal George Lucas, Sr., father of the guy who'd become the most famous alumnus of the USC School of Cinema Arts. Baer's eclectic career included directing more than 164 episodes of TV's Green Acres, as well as the Duo-Vision oddity Wicked Wicked, a 1973 slasher film presented entirely in split screen, a favorite of our one-time TCM underground impresario Millie DeCherico. Now stick around for a special treat after this. We've got one of Baer's Joe McDoke's shorts coming up, chosen especially for this occasion. I'll be back next week with one of the more unique pictures of the film noir era, The Gangster, starring Barry Sullivan as the titular racketeer, alongside my frosty heartthrob Belita, the ice queen of noir. If you miss it, you'd better have a good excuse. Till then, see you in the shadows.
Next on TCM, Twice in a Lifetime. Then one is a lonely number. And later, live a little, love a little. Learn a lot on TCM Today.